Have you ever heard of bats being used as bombs and soldiers in pink uniforms who terrified the enemy? How about a battle won without a single shot fired? These aren't made-up stories. They're real military facts that almost no one knows about. And I promise you, the last one will leave you speechless. Stick around until the end, because today you're going to discover the most bizarre, insane, and surprising side of war. From the US bat bombs. During World War II, the world's greatest powers were willing to do anything to win. And when I say anything, I mean literally anything. Picture this: a secret military lab in the heart of the United States. Scientists, officers, and animal behavior experts gathered, discussing a proposal that sounded like something straight out of a horror film. The idea was simple and absurd. Attach incendiary bombs to small bats. Yes, live bats, and release them over Japanese cities. The plan was called Project X-Ray. It was dreamed up by a dentist named Lytle S. Adams, a friend of President Roosevelt's wife. Adams believed that if bats were released at dawn, they would seek shelter in rooftops, which, at the time in Japan, were largely made of wood and paper. Once the incendiary devices activated, the bats would ignite the cities into flames. The most surprising part? The US government took the idea seriously. Months of testing followed. Bats were captured from caves in Texas. Tiny bombs were strapped to their bodies, and the results were, let's just say, chaotic. In one of the tests, the bats escaped and accidentally set fire to a portion of the military base itself. The project quickly became a joke among the troops. After all, how do you control thousands of nocturnal, unpredictable creatures with explosives strapped to their backs? Despite its failure, Project X-Ray showed just how far the human mind is willing to go during war. No idea was too absurd. No suggestion was dismissed without first being tested, and the bat bombs ended up becoming one of the weirdest and most forgotten curiosities in military history. In war, even animals become weapons, and sometimes the line between genius and madness is far too thin. Imdu. The Swiss army invaded a country by accident. When we talk about military invasions, what usually comes to mind are tanks crossing borders, planes flying over enemy territory, and armed confrontations. But what if I told you there's a recorded invasion in history where everything happened by mistake and no one even realized they were in another country? It happened in 2007, right in the heart of the 21st century. A group of 170 Swiss soldiers was carrying out a nighttime training exercise in the mountains. The mission was simple: simulate a tactical military march, moving silently and with total precision. But no one expected that. In the middle of the fog, the darkness, and the rugged terrain, the Swiss army would accidentally cross the border into Liechtenstein, a tiny country neighboring Switzerland, with just over 30,000 inhabitants and no armed forces. The soldiers walked for several kilometers inside Liechtenstein's territory without realizing it. Neither they nor the locals noticed. No shots fired, no alarms, no resistance at all. When they finally realized the mistake, they simply turned back to Switzerland, like someone who realizes they took the wrong street in the middle of the night. The most unbelievable part? The response from the Liechtenstein government. When informed about the invasion, the spokesperson simply replied, "No problem, these things happen." No diplomatic tension, no sanctions, nothing. Just a curious footnote in history, and this wasn't the first time. In 1985, Switzerland accidentally fired missiles into a forest in Liechtenstein. In 1992, Swiss soldiers built an observation post inside the neighboring country. And in every case, Liechtenstein just shrugged it off. Maybe this is the closest Switzerland has come to a military conflict in decades. A living proof that not every invasion has to end in war. Sometimes it just ends with a no worries, it happens. 3. The battle won without a single shot. After an accidental invasion, you might be wondering, is it really possible to win a battle without firing a single shot? Yes, and it really happened. It was during the Gulf War in 1991. The world watched as the United States and its allies faced off against the Iraqi army, led by Saddam Hussein. The battles were intense, the images shocked the entire planet. But one of the most incredible stories from that war involved no explosions and no soldiers running through gunfire. It happened in the desert. A group of Iraqi soldiers, exhausted, frightened, and unsure of what awaited them, saw a small flying machine appear in the sky. A drone. At the time, drones were nowhere near as common as they are today. That mysterious presence triggered immediate panic. The soldiers were well aware of the US air power. They knew that if such a device was in the area, an attack was likely imminent. Their reaction? They dropped their weapons, raised their hands, and surrendered. Believe it or not, there wasn't a single American soldier on the ground, just that unarmed drone surveying the area. It became the first military surrender in history caused by a robot. No combat, no casualties, just the psychological fear of modern warfare, where the enemy isn't always visible, and sometimes the mere presence of technology can determine the outcome of a battle. This event became a milestone. From that point on, military strategies began to shift dramatically. If in the past it was necessary to physically dominate enemy territory, now it was possible to dominate through fear, uncertainty, and invisible presence. And just like that, technology proved that war isn't made only of bullets, but also of perception. And on that day, a drone won a battle all by itself. 4. Pink war uniforms. After seeing soldiers surrendering to a drone, you might think nothing else could surprise you. But what if I told you that there was once a feared battalion on the battlefield, wearing hot pink uniforms? It's true, no joke, no exaggeration. In the 19th century, during internal conflicts in Argentina, a military group became known not only for their courage, but also for the unusual color of their uniforms. They were called Los Colorados del Monte, an elite battalion loyal to General Juan Manuel de Rosas. But why pink? At the time, Rosas, who was not only a military leader but also a strict-handed politician, used the color as a symbol of loyalty and resistance. Pink was the official color of the regime. Wearing it as part of a military uniform was a clear show of support for the cause, a political statement, and a bold challenge to the enemy. Picture it: soldiers marching in long coats, pink scarves, bright cartridge belts, surrounded by dust, sweat, and blood. From a distance, it might have seemed humorous, but those who faced them knew there was nothing soft about them. Los Colorados became famous for their bravery. They took part in decisive battles, faced powerful enemies, and never hesitated to charge forward, even when outnumbered. And it wasn't just the color that made them stand out. They had a fierce reputation for discipline, and were often used as shock troops in key confrontations. This contrast between appearance and attitude became so striking that, years later, historians still refer to them as one of the most iconic and controversial military units in Argentine history. In war, appearances can be deceiving. What defines a soldier isn't the color of their uniform, but what they're willing to do while wearing it. And Los Colorados proved that even pink can march with power. Hitler was a decorated soldier. After hearing about pink-clad soldiers and battles won without a single shot, you might think nothing else can surprise you. But there's a dark and ironic detail in military history that few people know. A detail about one of the most hated names in human history, Adolf Hitler. Before he became the dictator who plunged the world into the Second World War, before Nazism, before the Holocaust, Hitler was a simple soldier. During the First World War, he volunteered for the German army. He served as a messenger, a dangerous and highly respected role at the time. While bullets filled the air and bombs exploded all around, messengers would cross open fields, carrying life-or-death information between trenches. It was a job for the brave, and he performed it for nearly the entire war. Hitler was wounded twice in combat. More than that, he was awarded the Iron Cross, one of the highest military honors in the German army. The most surprising detail? That medal was recommended by a Jewish officer. Yes, the irony is as cruel as it is symbolic. Years later, the very man whose courage was acknowledged by a Jew would become responsible for the persecution, imprisonment, and extermination of millions of Jews. Reports from that time describe Hitler as a solitary soldier, quiet, with few friends. His superiors considered him brave, but strange. After the war ended, he felt betrayed by Germany's surrender and began diving deeper into nationalist speeches and radical ideologies. The rest of the story, the world knows all too well. It's shocking to think that a man who once served bravely on the front lines, shoulder to shoulder with soldiers of all backgrounds, would later divide the world with hatred, death, and destruction. A bitter reminder that even war has its paradoxes, and that courage doesn't always walk hand in hand with goodness. War, though one of humanity's darkest expressions, also holds stories that defy logic, morality, and even common sense. Bats turned into bombs, soldiers invading countries by accident, battles won by fear, not by firepower, warriors in pink, and one of history's greatest tyrants, once a decorated soldier. These curiosities are more than just strange facts. They're windows into the human, contradictory, and unexpected side of military history. They show us that not everything in war is made of screams, gunpowder, and blood. Sometimes, absurdity chance, and irony speak louder than weapons. And that's why here, on this channel, you'll find more than dates and battles. You'll find stories. Stories that surprise, shock, teach, and make you think. And make. So if this content kept you hooked until now, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because in the next video, war will surprise you again, but in a way you might never have imagined. Until then, soldier, stay strong. History still has a lot to reveal.